The Honorable Order of Universal Co-Masonry presents Masonic Articles and Essays. The Two-Headed Eagle of the Ancient and Accepted Rite by Brother W. J. Ketwad Crawley. Originally published in Ars Quatuor Coronatorum, Volume 24, 1911, Quatuor Coronati Lodge No. 2076, pages 21 through 24. When this emblem was first adopted by the high degrees, it had been in use as a symbol of power for 5,000 years. The most ornamental, not to say the most ostentatious feature of the insignia of the Supreme Council, 33rd degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, is the double-headed eagle, surmounted by an imperial crown. This device seems to have been adopted sometime after 1758 by the grade known as the Emperors of the East and West, a sufficiently pretentious title. This seems to have been its first appearance in connection with Freemasonry, but the history of the high grades has been subjected to such distortion that it is difficult to accept unreservedly any assertion put forward regarding them. From this imperial grade, or with this imperial grade, the two-headed eagle came to the sovereign prince masons of the Rite of Perfection. This Rite of Perfection, with its 25 degrees, was amplified in 1801 at Charleston, USA, into the ancient and accepted Rite of 33 degrees, with the double-headed eagle for its most distinct emblem. When this emblem was first adopted by the high degrees, it had been in use as a symbol of power for 5,000 years or so. No heraldic bearing, no emblematic device in wear today can boast such antiquity. It was in use 1,000 years before the Exodus from Egypt and more than 2,000 years before the building of King Solomon's temple. The story of our eagle has been told by the eminent Assyriologist M. Thoreau Dangin in the volume of Zeitschrift für Assyriologie, 1904. Among the most important discoveries for which we are indebted to the late M. de Zarec were two large terracotta cylinders covered with many hundred lines of archaic cuneiform characters. These cylinders were found in the brick mounds of Tello, which has been identified with certainty as the city of Lagash, the dominant center of southern Babylonia, ere Babylon had imposed its name and rule on the country. The cylinders are now in the Louvre and have been deciphered by M. Thoreau Dangin, who displays to our wondering eyes an emblem of power that was already centuries old when Babylon gave its name to Babylonia. Footnote number 1. Zeitschrift für Assyriologie Strasbourg, 1904, Volume 18, page 119, Le Cylindre de Gourier, par François Thoreau Dangin. The cylinder in question is a foundation record, deposited by one Gudea, ruler of the city of Lagash, to mark the building of a temple about the year 3000 BC, as nearly as the date can be fixed. The foundation record was deposited just as our medals, coins, and metallic plates are deposited today when a cornerstone is laid with Masonic honors. It must be borne in mind that in this case, the word cornerstone can be employed only in a conventional sense, for, in Babylonia, all edifices, temples, palaces, and towers alike were built of brick. But the custom of laying foundation deposits was general, whatever the building material might be, and we shall presently see what functions are attributed, by another eminent scholar, to the foundation chamber of King Solomon's temple. The contents of the inscription are of the utmost value to the Oriental scholar, but may be briefly dismissed for our present purpose. Suffice it to say that the king begins by reciting that a great drought had fallen upon the land. The waters of the Tigris, he says, fell low, and the store of provender ran short in this my city, so that he feared it was a visitation from the gods, to whom he determined to submit his evil case and that of his people. The reader familiar with the Babylonian methods that pervade the books of the captivity will not be surprised to learn that the king dreamed a dream in which the will of the gods was revealed by direct personal intervention and interlocution. In the dream there came unto the king a divine man whose stature reached from heaven to earth, and whose head was crowned with the crown of a god, surmounted by the storm bird that extended its wings over Lagash and the land thereof. This storm bird, no other than our double-headed eagle, was the totem, as ethnologists and anthropologists are fain to call it, of the mighty Sumerian city of Lagash, and stood proudly forth, the visible emblem of its power and dominion. This double-headed eagle of Lagash is the oldest royal crest in the world. As time rolled on, it passed from the Sumerians to the men of Akkad, from the men of Akkad to the Hittites, from the denizens of Asia Minor to the Seljukian sultans, from whom it was brought by crusaders to the emperors of the East and West, whose successors today are the Habsburgs and the Romanovs, as well as to the Masonic emperors of the East and West, whose successors today are the Supreme Council's 33rd degree that have inherited the insignia of the Rite of Perfection. Such is the accredited account of the successive flights by which the double-headed eagle winged its way from the Tigris to the Danube and the Neva. But it is quite possible that when the medieval warriors brought home the storm bird, they brought it to that nest not for the first time. We have said above that Lagash was the center of a Sumerian people in the year 3000 BC. It has been established that the Sumerians were an Iranian people, quite distinct from the warlike men of Akkad, who were of Semitic descent. Sometime after the year 2800 BC, the fiery men of Akkad squeezed out the Iranians, and Babylonian became, to all intents and purposes, a Semitic kingdom for the time. The Sumerians appear to have followed the Iranian line of migration westwards and, very likely, brought with them the remembrance of their guardian bird of the olden time. Hence, the storm bird from Mesopotamia, with its double head and outstretched wings, may not have seemed altogether strange to the Slavs or the Teutons or the Celts, whose dim ancestry may have dwelt beside the Tigris. The emblem may have appealed to some vague subconscious inheritance of the kind that latter-day psychologists stigmatize as vestigial retroreminiscence. Verily, the nomenclature is germane to that blessed word Mesopotamia. Reverting to the text of the inscribed cylinder, we gather that the master of the storm bird was appeased by the king undertaking to build him a temple, and in response to the king's petition, inspired him and his builders with a heaven-born plan. A similar celestial origin is ascribed, commonly enough, to the more magnificent temples of the ancient East. For example, to the great temple of Horus at Edfu, built by the pharaoh under direct inspiration of the god Imhotep. Footnote number 2. The old temple at Edfu, built for the worship of Horus, son of Knef and Hathor, was explored by Mariette Bey and is reputed to contain an inscribed tablet or slab on which is delineated a geometrical approximation to the ratio of the diameter to the circumference. Scientific readers will understand the ages upon ages that must have intervened between the dawn of geometrical conceptions and the period at which such a constant could begin to appear practicable or desirable or even conceivable. But this particular revelation to Gudea is noteworthy, because the circumstances of the revelation bear a strong family resemblance to those of the disclosure of the dimensions of the tabernacle to Moses on Mount Sinai, as described in Exodus 25 at Sekhor. The cuneiform text is opportunely illustrated on this point by the discovery of a fine basalt statue of Gudea, buried for ages in the same mounds of Lagash. He is represented in the sitting posture common to Oriental statues of great monarchs, and he holds on his knees what is now plainly seen to be a draftsman's tablet, with the design inscribed on it, while hard by are the graver's tools and scale, for all the world like a tracing board, gauge, skirt, and pencil of today. The mise en scène has an indefinable resemblance to the frontispieces with which the engravers of the 18th century were wont to decorate the Pocket Companion and similar books. The cuneiform inscription goes on to describe the ceremony of laying the cornerstone, with 1,000 details of inestimable value to the archaeologist, but in no way bearing on the story of the double-headed eagle. These things came to pass under the wings of the storm bird in Lagash of the Sumerians, and were there written down, more than 1,000 years before Abram, the Hebrew, dwelt in Ur of the Chaldees. This recording is brought to you by Universal Co-Masonry. Visit universalfreemasonry.org for more information.